Okay, so we have a new episode of Legends and Leaders, and today it's great to have Ben here. Ben, you're somebody who's studied the way that humans work and interact and the way the resources are spent on them and tried to just understand how we can optimize this better. You have experience working at IBM, one of the top technology companies in the world, and saw how resources were spread out and thought that there's better ways, to do that and to improve these. So I'm excited to have you here and to get into your story and talk about what you're building and as well as what you've written.
Cool. Yeah, thanks for having me.
Awesome. So Ben, just kind of going back in your journey, how did you get interested in this topic specifically? Like what led to you wanting to spend so much of your time dedicated to understanding optimization of resources for people?
Yeah, so I had kind of started my career in academia, and I'd done a PhD in economics and kind of specialized in labor economics, really for no other reason that it had the professors that I wanted to take. It wasn't, I just kind of landed in it. Um, but then I spent some time in finance and at a hedge fund. And what's interesting about working at a hedge fund, specifically the what they call the buy side in finance, is that everyone's got a Bloomberg terminal and they've got all the data they could possibly want just at their fingertips, ready to be used, and that's just how they operate. And then I then went to IBM, that, like you mentioned, and it's and since I had specialized in labor economics, I was put in charge of this workforce analytics team. So the idea was that we would analyze HR data from IBM and essentially try to improve IBM's business performance, find ways to improve their performance by analysis of their human capital data, their HR data. And through that process, kind of got into this people analytics scene, this network of people that were doing some similar work, and realized how far behind it was relative to financial markets. In finance, everything's categorized really nicely. There's ubiquity. Everyone shares the same information. And there's a lot of reasons why that's the case. The existence of accountants are really, the whole occupation exists to categorize financial data. And, we it's very native to how we understand the world, that like information about companies, about capital, needs to be categorized and understood. And information about people is not well understood. Every company invents their own way of doing things, which is, there's no benchmarking between companies. There's no standardization. There's no ubiquity. There's no shared information. So that kind of made me think, wow, we are in the Stone Ages, and labor markets are twice as big as capital markets. And this seemed like an important thing to get right. It's hard to think of anything that isn't affected by labor markets. It's how everyone in the world spends their time. So, I mean, exaggerating a little bit, but like not that much. So it just seemed really important to kind of get the data right.
How did you think about like actually gathering this data and understanding it much better?
Yeah. So inside a company, at IBM, for example, we had, I don't know, 400,000 people, and we had an HR database with 400,000 people. And that was, we had a lot of information about those individuals, those employees. And that was really, some information we had that we could not access externally, like someone's performance reviews, let's say, like that's just private data. It's never going to be accessible. But a lot of that information could be accessible publicly. Like, we have someone's, name and job title and start date and like, location, all this stuff. And all of that information is on someone's resume or on someone's, LinkedIn profile or something like that. So that really was not private information. Excuse me. So we really thought, is it possible to kind of gather the whole universe of resumes and public profiles and all this information and essentially kind of reconstruct what the HR database might look like for a company? Now, the advantage of doing that is that then you can have what you can think of as like a universal database where you can make comparisons across companies. So without that, it's impossible to compare across companies. At IBM, we would never in our wildest dreams think like, I wonder what the attrition rate is at Oracle. Like they would never reveal that data. But through taking all the public data and standardizing that and cleaning it and dealing with all the messiness of it, we can get to a place where that data becomes ubiquitous and usable for anyone, even if they have no affiliation to a given company.
Mm-hmm. So, like when you were trying to get this data to even just understand stuff better, like what went into that process for you to do that? There's a lot of public stuff you just mentioned, but there's also some private stuff. I would think the private stuff is more valuable to get. Were people really willing and ready to help?
For private stuff, not at all. It's just a non-starter. So companies will not sell their HR data. It's just it's a locked box, and there's no getting it. So we do have to rely on public data. And it's got limitations for sure in that it's written by people that have typos and don't know what they're doing and don't update, and there's sampling bias and all these things. Most of those problems are solvable, and once you do that, then there's information in that's not intern. You can see where people go when they leave a company. That's not something that gets stored in any company that I'm aware of. You can see what skills people have, what they do in their jobs, the bullet points, like how they describe their responsibilities. Like that's not stored in an HR database. So there's a lot of valuable information that's just in this universe of resumes, public profiles, that has tons of challenges. But once you get around that, it's really powerful. So that was kind of exciting. Like I think the difficulty and the messiness of the data was compelling because I don't know, it felt like a hard problem, and hard problems are attractive because they're hard. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. So what was like the first big insight that you got from this that you were like just super surprised by, Ben?
I think the first, there's a few different angles to that. So the first commercial model, which we kind of stumbled upon, was that we, with this information, we can get visibility into a company that we have no affiliation to. And even though the original idea was kind of bringing benchmarking to HR, we actually found that hedge funds were interested in this, which was really interesting because I'd never really thought of selling this data to hedge funds. But then we found that they were very eager and willing to pay for data that gives them visibility into companies. And then we found some metrics that were very predictive of performance and returns. So I'll give you one simple example. Like let's say we find that there's a spike in the attrition rate of salespeople. We find a bunch of salespeople are quitting. That's probably a sign that the company's not going to hit their targets. We can see when a company announces like, oh, we're investing heavily in whatever, AI or robotics or whatever, like we can see, are they recruiting from the best places? Are they retaining people? Are they paying the most? Are they posting a lot of jobs? This is information that, speculators really want to understand. And once they understand it, then you can get visibility into CEOs and CFOs and boards. This comes up on earnings calls. So it's something that is just so part of how everyone understands what happens at companies. So it's been really interesting. And I think when we started this in 2018. So a little over 7 years ago. And in that time, labor markets have just been going wild. There was COVID, and there was the Great Resignation, and there was pay transparency, and now there's restrictions on immigration, and the BLS becoming politicized. There's all these changes that have made this such a dynamic field that it really wasn't when we started this. So it's been a lot of surprises.
So how do you take these insights and then apply it, make it useful? Like what kind of goes into just, is it targeting companies and explaining to them like, hey, you could be changing this in what you do? Or is it more like on the people, like affecting individual people, going to them and talking about what they do and affecting their habits?
Yeah, it's more the former. So it's really mostly about, analytics on larger groups of people. So very rarely at the individual person level. But what we do so I would say a lot of work goes into processing this information. So, of course, it has to be scraped and collected. It has to be, and then it has to be mapped to something useful. So, if someone writes a company name, you have to map that to some entity and some parent company and some like identifiers. And, you have to disambiguate. There's like 12 different Zooms out there. Like, what's the Zoom that people mean when they say I work at Zoom, Um, so, there's a lot of disambiguation. And then, the hardest part is really about developing taxonomies where people can understand this, where there is no ground truth. There's no fixed set of occupations in the world or skill groups or work activities, but these are things that we have to create. So we do a lot of work in job architecture, and have done a lot of research around like how to structure information about employees such that you can have a data set that it can be displayed and delivered in a traditional analytics workflow. So you can, query like, okay, what's the growth rate of this? What's the, share of employees with this skill or something? So that's really what we want to get to, a place where this data can be queried easily. And once that happens, then there's a whole bunch of different applications. Then, it can be used for talent intelligence, which could be sourcing analytics or, finding the best pools of talent to recruit from. It can be used for strategic workforce planning. How do we analyze like what we have too many people doing and not enough people doing, and what's the best path? Do we fill these gaps by hiring, by retraining people, by doing some reorg? These are big questions. Even like, how do we analyze the employee experience? We get a lot of data from like employee reviews from Glassdoor, Fishbowl, Blind. These are places where people say what they like and don't like about a company. We can analyze like why people are leaving, why it takes a long time to fill position. So there's just a lot of different questions you can answer, and a lot of different groups within a company that are interested in answering these questions. I mean, not just for their own company, but also for competitors, and they can see how they're stacking up. So I'd say the way we think about how we're positioning ourselves is that, we want to build the building blocks. We want the foundational data that can be queried, but we're not really designing it around a specific application or specific workflow. It's really designed in a way where it could be something kind of like a Bloomberg terminal that exists in finance, just all the data you need for any question that comes up.
How kind of close are you to getting to the point that you have this fully, that you're happy with it, in the amount of data that it has? I mean, like, what are the stages of the development on that?
Yeah, so I think we're pretty happy. I mean, I think we've got what we think of as like this universal HR database. It's super well structured. It's nice and neat. You can answer tons of different questions. Having said that, there's lots of work to do. I mean, we are on version God knows what of how we adjust for lags and when people report transitions, and we are in the middle of creating a new taxonomy of work activities. We're taking on which is really important in the age of AI, because we know that technology doesn't displace jobs wholesale; it displaces components of jobs. The tasks, the work activities. So as companies are thinking about how they adapt to technological change, it's really important to get information at the task level and see how jobs reconfigure. That's like a huge area for us now. We want to get more granular geographic insights. We want to have we want to have better ways of inferring salary for a given position, and just collecting more data globally. There's so many things to do. So I don't know if we'll ever be like fully satisfied with where we're at, but I already feel like there's a lot of ways to get good, clean insights today.
I mean, I'm sure AI is helpful, Ben, when it comes to getting more insights, but is it helpful on the data gathering part? And like, how have you been using AI effectively now?
Yeah, I mean, we really came out with this technology in the early days of large language models, and it was really only possible because of AI. Because there's, I don't know, 40, 50 million unique job titles. We're not going to process those manually. We needed to have large language models to understand, that lawyer and attorney mean the same thing. To understand that a product manager at Facebook is a really different job than a product manager at JP Morgan, that we need to understand like what titles mean in a certain context, what kind of skills correspond to different tasks and activities. All of these things rely on large language models to operate. So the whole foundation has to be built on large language models. We don't like to say we're built on AI really because it seems kind of something people say when they're just when they don't really understand AI. So there's this expression in the AI community that that there's no such thing as AI. AI is just math once you understand it. And I think that's right. That once you're like using large language models, at scale and production, and once you're sort of at the cutting edge of some domain, then there's a lot of choices to make around how you configure certain models and how you fine tune them to certain tasks. So I think we don't like to say AI because it's kind of just like a bit too buzzy. But yeah, I mean, we wouldn't be able to do any of this without large language models and transformers and generative models to label things and create better representations of what jobs are and where they belong. I mean, one way to think about this is that I mentioned earlier that for financial market data we have armies of accountants. I don't know how many accountants there are in the world, but millions, and they have the job of categorizing capital market data. And there are no people in the world who have the job of categorizing labor market data. There is no accountant for human capital, and I think we were able to kind of leapfrog that through AI, through large language models. That makes it not necessary to have human people manually categorizing things.
Interesting. So what's your biggest focus now, Ben?
Yeah, I mean, a lot of different things. I'd say so I just wrote a book about job architecture. So we're working a lot about on helping companies organize their employees, create taxonomies of occupation, skills, and work activities. And this work activities piece is really critical. I mean, for the reasons I mentioned, that it's a foundational building block to kind of understanding like AI readiness for every company. So definitely taxonomies of work activities and tasks is like really foundational right now, trying to help companies kind of be able to categorize people in a way that they can adapt to change. So that's a huge focus. We also just put out a data release called Revelio Public Labor Statistics, RPLS, and that really is meant to create a sense of the health of the labor market. New job additions, hiring rates, attrition rates, change in wages. That's just kind of free, just macroeconomic data that could be seen as a complement to the public data that comes out from the Bureau of Labor Statistics, from the Department of Labor. And I'd like it to be a complement, but unfortunately it's more like a substitute these days now that the government is shut down. And so we kind of missed the data release. So we've been able to kind of offer labor market information, and I think we want to see what that can do. Maybe expand this globally, and just try to produce more public labor statistics that I think the world really needs. So this isn't really something we're doing commercially, but it's something that I think is just really important and underrated, and it's something that I think we're a team of labor economists, and I mean among other types of roles, but we have a lot of labor economists, and I think it feels like the right move. So a lot of focus and energy is going to that.
Just the last question I have, Ben, like, what do you expect the result to be of your work? I mean, do you see quality of work improving, people spending less time on things they don't need to be spending, maybe people allocated differently within companies? Like, what do you expect the result to be from your efforts?
Yeah, it's a great question. I mean, I think I think the way I kind of frame our mission is like we want to make labor markets more sophisticated, and that is, to what end? I think it's ultimately for better matches between employees and employers. Like people should spend their time working productively at a place where they want to work and at a place where they would get the most value from their work. And firms, the actual, demand side of labor should, have the workforce that they need to fulfill their strategies. They should be able to differentiate among other firms and find the people that best, find, retain, and manage the people that fulfill their goals. I think it's so often the case that we don't get that. Companies hire the wrong people all the time. People find themselves in jobs that are all wrong. They stay in careers too long. There's not a lot of visibility. And I think, and even like, kids who are choosing like what they want to do and what they should major in and all that, they don't have visibility into the labor market. It's very opaque. I think they sometimes go to career centers, which are basically worthless, and they try to, get some sense of what they should be doing with their time based on little or no information. So I think by providing an environment where there's rich information and analytical capability and simplicity, will let people ask and answer important questions for themselves, for their company, and I think we'll be a happier, more productive society, with better functioning labor markets.
Well, Ben, I appreciate you taking the time and doing this. I think it's great that you're trying to give a new perspective and outlook on what's happening within the labor market. It's an area where there hasn't been as much data as what's been needed. And there's, I think, a lot more that can be done based on what you're doing to improve the workplace. And I think everyone wants that, employers, employees, et cetera. So I'm excited to see what you'll do next. And people should definitely check out the book you wrote that breaks down a lot more of what you're creating and doing here. And I'm looking forward to what's to come. Thanks for doing this.